Hi there, everyone. Welcome. We're just waiting for everybody to be let in and to join us, and then we can start. May I ask, whilst we're waiting, just to type in the chat box where you are from which country or from which city you are from. It's always lovely to sort of see where our people are joining from. Currently, we only have the AI people. Hi, Rihanna. I see you from Joburg. We've got Joyce from Kampala. Nice to meet you, Joyce. Cape Town. Ecosystem Marketing. May we know what your name is? And because it might be easier just to call you on a different name than Ecosystem Marketing. Hi, Teresa from Krugersdorp in South Africa, but currently in Scottsboro. I hope you're enjoying the beach. Hi, Ethel. Nice to meet you. Hi, Amanda. Amanda's from Pretoria, and she's one of our IABC fellows. We've got Camilla. She is our IABC Africa chairperson from Joburg. Hi, Camilla. Okay. Natalie, are we still waiting for people, or can we start?
We are still waiting, but yeah.
Okay. Kemogetse from Botswana, nice to meet you. Marika from Cape Town. Tembakazi from Kariga. Ah, welcome. Okay. Let's see. Another person from Kariga, Sinuvoyu. I hope that I'm pronouncing it correctly. If not, I apologize. Okay, so we seem to be from all over Africa. It's nice. Okay, we're going to give them one more minute and then we can start. Okay. Diana, can I ask you if there's any comments or questions in the chat, if you will just alert us to that and then we can handle those? So,
certainly, Christine.
Super, thank you. It's 3 minutes past 5, good after past 3 in South Africa. In Tanzania, Sabra, it's now 3 minutes past 4, if I'm correct. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. So our webinar for today is about strategic storytelling. Now, storytelling has been a rumor that we've all been talking about, and have you done this, and are you implementing it? But I do think that people have different ideas in terms of what storytelling is and how we can use it. So today we said, let's get our top minds in Africa together to help us to understand what storytelling means to them and how they apply them. So can we go to the next slide, Natalie? Thank you. So one of the things that as communicators, we have to use storytelling because it builds trust and it shapes authentic narratives. And I think that is the very important thing that we are going to talk about today. Storytelling drives meaningful engagements because we all know if you tell someone a story, they actually remember that better than what they remember dates or stats or anything. Okay. Our speakers for today, no, not a problem. So our speakers for today, our first speaker, Natalie, if you can go to the next slide, is Sola Ababulu. Now, Sola is from Nigeria, And Sola, if I am correct, you were our first SCMP in West Africa. Sola has been in comms for the past 25 years. She's a business leader. She's a trusted advisor. She really loves strategic communication and reputation and crisis management. And she's worked in Nigeria, she's worked in the UK, and she's worked in the Netherlands. She also heads up Sola Abula and Associates. She loves training. If you want to sort of get her on a Wednesday or a Thursday, normally it's absolutely impossible because she's then always doing training herself. Sola, thank you very much for being with us today. We are looking forward to your wisdom and your insights. Our next participant that definitely I'm going to talk to you today is Kirsty Niehaus. So Kirsty is a CMP and she's on the verge of writing her SCMP, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, Kirsty. She is a marketing communications and a brand executive, and she's currently the general manager hospitality at Nando's. So in South Africa, Nando's is one of our loved brands, but they also have shops in the UK, in America, and elsewhere. So Kirsty, we're looking forward to your insights on how a brand can have the same narrative or possibly different narratives. That is what we're going to find out in different countries. And how do you manage that so that it still stays an authentic brand? And the last person that said yes, love to be part of this is Sabra Saleh. Sabra is from Tanzania, and she is our CMP there. So Sabra believes that happy employees are the foundation of a strong, profitable organization, and that is why she is specializing in developing connections within and between company teams. She also has her own company, Toolkit, where she does research and training. And yeah, she comes from a diverse background. And Sabra, we can't wait to hear what you have to tell us today.
Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. This is going to take on the format where we ask questions, and it is a panel discussion. So if you have any, please type them in the chat box. Rihanna will tell us. If you have comments, there is this lovely emoji one that says react, so you can give us thumbs up or woohoo or anything so that we can see that you are out there and that we're not speaking to the abyss. Okay, so let's get along. Kirsty, let's start with you for the first one. In your experience, what role does storytelling play in helping African leaders build bridges, especially in moments of change or uncertainty?
Hello, everyone. So I think a powerful example of this was Nelson Mandela and the 1995 World Cup. It's really a great example of an African leader demonstrating the power of storytelling through a sports event. So this event really bridged the divides and fostered reconciliation in the newly formed democracy of South Africa. And some instrumental parts of the story was the iconic image of Nelson Mandela wearing the Springbok rugby jersey, as well as his final message when we eventually won the World Cup. And the message was all about that sport has the power to change the world. And I think both of these really symbolize that in the new South Africa, that unity and diversity was possible. And the whole energy behind the World Cup and the fact that it was, black and white players playing really helped heal some of the deep divisions that we had, built this huge sense of national pride. And I think it's a really great example of how storytelling and sport can really, be used to connect and resonate with various different audiences.
Okay, love it. Thank you. Sola, let's move on to you. So you have guided major multinational organizations through high-stake transformations and reputational challenges. How did you use storytelling as a strategic tool during these times of crisis or change, and especially when trust is fragile and stakeholders are watching you closely?
Thanks, Christine. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Lovely to be here. And yeah, I hope this is going to be interactive. So, and just to say, I did put it in the chat. I am the second SCMP from West Africa, not the first. The first was Tuposa Afolayo, so that's fine. Anyways, so I have several examples, but let me just say one. One that struck out to me was when I was working in for a multinational firm in Nigeria at the time, and there was an issue going on in terms of crude oil theft, and everybody was blaming the oil companies and saying that they were not taking care of their pipelines well enough. And they just didn't, nobody really understood how it was possible for people to break pipelines, the sabotage, all of that going on. And, the company had to then go about telling that story and actually telling and showing people the context of the environment, bringing them into it, using independent reporters, primarily third-party voices, just going in there and seeing the scale of what was going on in that negative sense, just to provide a little bit of context that when you see certain incidents in certain locations, it's not always, don't just assume that it's the operator, that, it can actually be caused by certain activities. And reporters went in, they did their thing, and they were able to, so it was able to balance the narrative. And looking back at that time, since that time, that context has stuck within Nigeria, because Nigeria is so big. I mean, what I found is that most people have no clue what's happening in other regions when they don't live there. We're so completely, people are shut in. Very few Nigerians actually travel across the country and live with other people. So certain things, because it's not, you don't understand what, it couldn't happen in your context. You can't imagine why it's happening somewhere else. So the company had to, at that time, really, really do a tell and show and provide context and say, yes, when this sort of incidents happen, you need to find out why it happened and that there are several reasons why. It could be this, it could be this, it could be that. Just providing that context was enough. Until today, I think that narrative has sort of like, it's balanced the conversation for the industry as a whole, nationally. Yeah. And that was like 15 years ago.
Okay, so how important is research then when it comes to actual storytelling? So it's not quite as easy as just deciding, this is the one, we put it into ChatGPT and see what it comes up with.
Yeah, so again, you have to understand your audience, and then you have to understand the narratives that are out there and what will resonate with each one. And so that sort of mapping was done, whereby it was like, okay, what are the narratives that are coming out there? What do people need to see to convince them that this is not exactly what they need? And who are the credible voices that can speak to that? So that's where you're very correct. That's where the research and the data, because otherwise you pull out the narrative. That was not even a narrative that the company could put out on its own. So people like writers, journalists, independents actually just went in. So it was that sort of thing where sometimes you're not the best person to tell that story, and you have to understand that. So yes, a little bit of research into what are we trying to achieve, who is the audience, what best resonates them, how do we reach that?
Okay, thank you. So the next one is actually for all three of you, but Sabra, I'm going to give you the opportunity to actually start. One of the things is we all have these strategic documents or these data-ridden information. We have policies, things that is important for corporate governance, but how do we translate it so that our employees or our audiences actually understand it, that it's not just this, what on earth are you talking about? How do we make it easy for them?
Thank you. And I'm glad to be here as well, to have this conversation with everyone. We all have different types of audiences depending on who we're dealing with. Like Sola just mentioned, research is very important. So if we have strategic documents and we want everybody to be able to understand and and relate to the stories that we share, we really need to know who the people are. What do they care about the most? Who do they trust? How do they like to receive their information? How would they, connect with the person, because the people within organizations, for example, they're the ones with the story. And then how does their story relate to their colleagues and everybody else they interact with? So I think connecting with the subject for me is always the most important one, especially on a friendly basis, where they're comfortable, to talk about what makes them do the work that they're doing. As communication professionals, I always say we shouldn't stay behind our desks, but we should always be at the field, on site, at the different organizational branches. We need to be down on the ground to really see what is being done, to feel the passion of the employees and the people that we are talking about, and to really connect with them when we don't have a story to tell. Because once we create that connection, then they'll be more comfortable sharing their stories with us, and we will be able to relate it back to what the organization needs to share and understand them better. So one of the things that I think helps you develop stories that are relatable is giving them the tools they need to be able to tell their stories. They don't have to be writers. I mean, a lot of them that we deal with are not writers, but at least they can be trained to identify what part of their work and what passion they have is actually a good story. Asking them to dig deeper, to share their purpose on why they do the things that they're doing, what touches them. Helping them use simple language, especially when it comes to engineers or researchers and scientists.
Yes.
And making them sorry? Yeah. And making them really establish a human connection. And one of the things I think most of us in communications like to say, talk about it like you're explaining it to a 5-year-old or your grandmother.
Exactly. Yeah.
And in terms of, if let's say the document is an annual report, how the company, if it's internal communication, how the company supports its employees, what type of story will resonate and also amplify the company's values. So I think these are the few things we need to keep in mind to making our official documents, strategies, annual reports a little bit more relatable with real stories and authentic ones.
Super, thank you. I see there's a question from Amanda. So Sola, I'm going to throw it over to you. And because it's still part of this, can organizations use their corporate myth in ways that tell the company story? Sorry, I'm going to give that to Kirsty. Sorry, Sola, because I think she might be better suited for this. I often see organizations using this slogan on everything: water bottles, t-shirts, bus, bucket hats, etc. And I feel that there must be a better way. Kirsty, how do you get Nando's excited, and how do you keep the brand exciting with that whole storytelling theme?
So from a merchandise perspective, what we found works really well is that you really need to make the merch cool. So you often see companies, they want to heavily brand their stuff. So you've got this big brand name across the top of your top. So whatever, Pick and Pay or whatever it is. I shouldn't use another brand, sorry. But whatever it is, but that isn't cool. No one really wants to wear that. So what we do is we subtly brand our items. So we'll have Nando's on a tag or a little Barcy somewhere. Of course, the Nando's Barcy is iconic and people love it. So we can be a bit bolder because people are okay to wear our brand a little bit more openly. But I think it's important not to think to over-brand your things, to be more subtle so that people would wear it with pride and someone say, that's a really cool top. Oh yeah, it's a Nando's top or it's a Nando's bag. So yeah, not to only think about your brand, but about the person wearing it. They need to feel proud and want to wear it, right? And be an ambassador of your brand. So you got to be cool as well.
Okay, I love it. Thank you. So Sola, let's ask you. In South Africa, we have 11 official languages. In Tanzania, there's over 100 non-official languages. And in Nigeria, you have about 400 indigenous languages in addition to your official languages. How do you maintain local relevance while ensuring that your message is consistent? Because as you just said, there's people that have not traveled. So how do we make sure that province A gets the same message as province B, or is it not as easy?
Sorry, is that for me?
That's for you, yes.
Okay, so okay.
Sorry,
So I
Zola.
think, yeah, so I think it's really about finding the common ground. And I've thought about this a lot, and I don't know if many organizations can do that, but for you to do it effectively, you have to find a common ground. A good example, or rather the best example I've seen in modern times is AFCON, the Confederation of African Football annual tournament that happened last year, 2023, which was really iconic in many ways. And they had a message around uniting Africans all over the world.
Information for ONGs or
And
for government.
they didn't, not only that they had that message, they illustrated it in terms of their strategy. So they went ahead and got about, I think they had commercial partnerships with about 13 countries, with 13 media organizations, Sky, BBC. They registered about 6,000 journalists, which was twice the amount that was done for previous CAF competitions. Everything about the messaging. In fact, it was like a celebration of African culture, African music, African dance, African art. To my mind, it was like the biggest cultural event in Africa. I can't think of any other event that unites the continent like they did, and they achieved that. So I think kudos to the chairman of CAF, who happens to be South African, for doing that. Excellent leadership. And for me, what I find really fascinating, the strategy, you could see the thinking. At the start of the tournament, he made a statement and said he believes this is going to be the biggest and the best AFCON ever had. And he delivered. 2 billion people watched it, viewed in 180 countries. So they set up they didn't see the tournament as an African tournament, which is what everyone else had been doing. And they realized that Africans are all over the world. Africa has a huge diaspora. And so they targeted the diaspora. There are Africans living in every corner of the planet who would want to watch the AFCON. And so they were watching the AFCON, the conversation on social media. I mean, I didn't watch any match apart from the Nigerian matches, but the content on social media was lit. And even in the matches, they would show the stands, show the fans, show everything. It was amazing. I think that was the best example of strategic storytelling that I have ever seen, where you've actually moved, a tournament that was typically for many years just a local tournament, almost to global standards. And I understand that they earned about $75 million in sponsorship through that, which was also iconic. So just so many things that were won. I think for me, the core thing about strategic storytelling or strategy is that you plan for it. You plan, and your vision drives everything that you do, from your messaging to your partnerships. You don't just put out messaging and then don't back it up with things. And I think that's where a lot of people do. They want to have very nice storytelling, but you're not doing anything. You want to say you are the leader in the entire world, and you're not doing anything that is world leading. So It's not just about creating or pushing out messaging that you want to. It's about how do you back it up? What are the proof points? I think they did that pretty well with the AFCON.
Thank you. Sabra, you often speak about the importance of authentic storytelling and aligning your internal and your external narratives. Is it possible to share with us how you help organizations to embed their values into their brand messaging and the way that it feels real? Because I think values is one of the most important things for a communication practitioner, because that's the basis on and how we link who we are and what we do back to our business and to our actual stakeholders. So how do you do that?
Thanks, Christine. This one's close to my heart because I was lucky enough to work with several organizations to link how they want to be perceived versus how they actually are. And in one of my experiences, I had to write a story for the organization's magazine, which was also shared externally in oil and gas. And they wanted to promote the hotline service for employees to be able to call and ask for mental health recommendations, speak to therapists online, which was a service given to employees. It was covered, but people weren't using the service as much. So of course, like I was saying earlier, I love to walk down and go to the field and talk to employees. And in my interaction with employees, I came across one of the construction engineers who had been sober for 10 years. And during his break time, he does lunch and learns with other colleagues on advising them to seek help if they're suffering from any substance abuse, and encouraging them to come up and actually say it, because in his experience, when he did report and say that he was struggling, the company sent him to rehab. He recovered, he was supported, he didn't lose his job. And for me, he was the perfect star character to talk about, if you come up and say you need help, you will be supported. You're not going to lose your job. And these services are available to everybody who needs it. Writing this story was one very emotional, not for me, but for also the person that I had to interview. It impacted his family. He lost, a lot of things going through this. And it's that human connection again, right? Understanding what is gone through. Yes, and it's relatable, right? It's relatable to the people that we were going to share the story with. And this kind of transparency really linked that the company doesn't only say they take care of their employees, they actually do take care of their employees. So for me, that's really, really important. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So listen, we normally assume that people know how to tell a good story. Come on, we've all grown up and we've read children's books and our grandmothers told us stories. But strategic storytelling requires a skill. So how important is training in helping communication teams and leaders tell their stories in a clear, relevant way, and that it's still aligned with our business goals? Because remember, if we look at our IABC Midas Touch, we always say whatever we do in comms, it needs to link back to what is our business goal. So how do we use storytelling in such a way that it is a strategic tool that we can use it? Sorry, Sola, that was once again for you.
Yes, okay. So I mean the importance of training. So yes, I like that you touched about that. People think that everyone can communicate. And well, everyone does communicate in some way, but not everyone can communicate well. Not everyone can communicate to influence, to advocate, to achieve business and organizational results. I mean, that requires a certain level of specialism, which is why people like us have jobs. So that's the thing. So a level of training is absolutely necessary. I mean, I worked with a brand recently in my independent consulting life where we had to make them, because they believe to the school of thought. So I have a lot of energy sector clients, and they generally believe that they're very, very conservative. They don't like to proactively tell their stories. They believe that its performance is much better and that storytelling is a little bit of fluff, and we had to make them, working with them, we made them realize that no, you have to really tell your story, because otherwise you're restricting the narrative to just what people have experienced of you, those people who have, who've actually been in the cold face with you. But you can actually, communicate even broader than people who are relating with you on a day-to-day basis. So working with that brand, and this was a brand that, honestly, I mean, there was an entire year they didn't post on LinkedIn, like 2 years or so, they had a massive following. Sure. But by the time we worked together and they understood the importance of storytelling, and there was a structure put in place to help them to do that, because again, there has to be a structure. There was a calendar, there was a content strategy, platform strategy, and all of that. They ran with the storytelling in fact, they literally went from 0 to 100. So they're the most amazing example of how creating awareness about the value of storytelling can actually drive the way an organization changes. And their storytelling delivered value for them on the business front, because by the time they now started making some strategic decisions, because a lot of people now knew who they were and what they stood out for, they were in a very strong place. So the storytelling was not just fluff. It was storytelling that actually increased their market position. This was a good company, a good brand. They did everything well, but they never talked about it. So most people didn't even know that they exist. But now literally they do. So by the time they, like I said, they did that strategic thing, it was, I mean, for me, and this all happened within 18 to 24 months. The transformation was amazing. So for me, that was one case of where just helping people or organizations to see the power of storytelling can make a big difference in business terms. I don't want to quote figures, but it delivered value in real money terms. Yes.
So let's this is a tongue in the cheek remark. Why didn't you enter that for the gold calls?
To be honest, I've been thinking about it, and the person who I'm going to have a conversation, I don't know, because the brand, she's the person who is also a member of IABC. It's a conversation we need to have because
Absolutely.
it's best in class. Yeah. Even their share price went up, everything. It was their investment.
You need to enter it. You need to enter it.
Man, it was
fantastic. Kirsty, Teresa says, how important is it that a leader tells a story lived? An example, a personal experience. Do you think that contributes to the whole story, or just get an actor and trying to convince us that this is his?
No, I think absolutely. The more you can be authentic in your storytelling and use real people from your company, the more powerful the story is. So, for example, when it was the start of the COVID crisis, we launched an ad that was called The Flame Goes Home, and it was narrated by our founder, Robbie Brosen. And it was the story of Nando's in a whole bunch of pictures from the very start in Rosettenville in 1987, where it launched, and then the sort of journey of the brand all the way till 2001. And he basically was saying today is the first day in 35 years or 34 years that we'll be turning our flames off in the restaurant. But because we're a very people-centric business, we lean into our value of family, and today the flame goes home, which means it's going home with all our Nandockers to their homes, and we continue to be this people-centric business where we believe in the sense of family. And that was such a powerful story of Nando's. And I think what made it resonate with a much wider audience was that it was obviously themed in a Nando's theme, but it could have been any person or any business. Just because your company was shutting down or your business was stopping for the COVID period or those 6 weeks of hard lockdown didn't mean that the spirit of your company or your person had to die. It just went home. Wow. So I think that was a perfect example of how we used an authentic story of the brand narrated by our founder to really resonate.
I actually have goosebumps. Wow, that's amazing. Thank you. Strategic storytelling is often labeled as soft, yet the impact is significant, like you all just shared with us. So how do we measure the effectiveness of storytelling in your campaigns or your change projects or anything that you do? Kirsty, I'm going to give that one back to you, because you've also entered quite a lot of quills for Nando's and you've won numerous wonderful awards. How do you measure storytelling? Because it's a very personal thing. How do you put a number to it?
Well, I think with any sort of a campaign or strategy that you put together, you decide what the measurements of success are up front. So it could be engagement, it could be reach, it could be internal culture, which could be measured through an internal survey. So there could be multiple measurements as long as you agree up front and decide what those measurements are and what percent. Storytelling itself, the power of it is more about how you resonate. So if you resonate and you connect with your audience, they will engage, and therefore you should have higher engagement rates, higher reach rates. So I suppose those would be some good metrics to look at.
Super. So I know we've got quite a few students on this webinar as well. So for the students, this is the right and the important answer. You need to measure everything that you do. It can't be just a gut feel and, oh, but my uncle's sister's father said that they actually liked it. Unfortunately, that is not cut it in comms.
Sorry, could I
Sabra.
say something about?
Yes, please,
Okay.
please do.
Okay. Sorry to butt in. Yeah, because I'm really passionate. Because I'm really passionate about metrics and quantifying, because I see that a lot of our people in our profession are stuck on all those sort of like platform and metrics where you are measuring impressions and likes and things like that, which I guess is okay in some respects, but for business leaders, I don't think they're moved by that. Except if your campaign was just about creating buzz, then if you create buzz, then you can be measuring buzz. But if there was a real life problem that needed to be resolved, your metrics should actually be tied to how you have helped to help people achieve those results. So for instance, I always talk about results in tangible terms. If it's that the company is having a poor safety record, people are not, keeping to the rules. You launch a campaign about safety, wearing your seatbelt, checking, certain things, and you launch it targeting the audiences that you see commit, are most vulnerable, or like the field workers. You do your baseline. So there have been 7 incidents before we started the campaign. After the campaign, 7, it dropped, that sort of thing. That's what actually impresses business leaders. So in a lot of my work, I am advocating to communications professionals that please begin to look for results in tangible terms and look for trackable actions that solve real life business problems, because that's when you get the respect of business leaders. Because for a lot of them, even if you've done a fantastic campaign and you have a lot of buzz and everything, except your objective was buzz, it will not impress the business leaders. Thank you.
Fantastic. I love your answer. That is so, so true. And it's something, I think that's why whenever you start a communication campaign, you have to use the Midas rubrics, because if you don't know how you're going to, well, first of all, if you don't know what you are going to measure, you're not going to get anywhere. And then you need to know how I am going to measure it. Okay. Sabra, I'm going to give this one to you. And this is from Joyce, what has been the experience of the speakers around storytelling that needs to speak to multiple diverse audiences? For example, government, policymakers, donors, and the general public. Do you tell different stories with different angles and language, or can you pull it off in a single story?
Thank you. That's a great question, one I have to work with quite often. So it depends on the story. And if the story is relatable, we go back to the people we tell our stories to are people just like us. So we need to be able to touch them with our story about who we are, what we're advocating for, what it means, what are the consequences. So if you're advocating to the government to change a policy, what are the consequences of them not taking action? How is it affecting the lives of communities? And what story do you have? I mean, in training storytellers, we find that sometimes the story is within, and it's maybe all the way down from their childhood, that they're not even aware that it could be a great advocate to share their work with different audiences. So I would recommend to share the same story. How you share that story with the different audiences is where the difference comes. So how you present it to the government will be different to how you present it to your donors and how you present it to your general public. So you have options, whether you're sharing policy briefs, videos, social media campaigns. So the story can stay consistent, but how you share it will depend on the audience you're sharing it to.
Okay, super, thank you. So here's, so seeing that you are the research lover, Sola, how do you get around survey fatigue, especially for cultural topics? I've spoken to 3 different companies only in this week where they've all done a survey culture and everybody's just like, bleh. So how do we get around it?
Yeah, that's a good question. And to be honest, yeah, I know about that survey fatigue. So you may want to do focus groups. And, in that regard, you look at, who are the audiences, if it's internal and an organization, maybe you're talking to people in one location, and find out about, who is best, who are the people that are influencers in that space that I can speak to. Whenever I go into a company, for instance, and I'm working with them and I want to get some insights, and I always do this. I don't do surveys except it's requested, but I will always interview 5, 6, or 7 people, one-on-ones, just to get a sense. And my criteria is they must be people working in a particular section of the organization with a certain sort of, they're going to come in not just with their perspective, but the perspective of the group that they represent. And in all cases, in fact, there was a survey that we did once for one firm where everything I heard from interviewing 12 people was validated when we eventually did the survey and got 140 responses. There was it was the same. So I could have gotten what I needed from speaking with 7 people, but then the 140 then gave us that. But then what it did was the insights from the 7 people helped us nuance the kind of questions we would ask, and and that sort of thing. But the feedback coming in, both through the quantitative questions as well as the open-ended responses, validated everything we got from that. So let's be careful about how often we issue the 10 question surveys. Talk to 1 or 2 people who are in critical roles and who are willing to share their perspective, and that will get you what you need. It's what I would say. Thank you.
Fantastic. Appreciate it. Kirsty, who has the authority to tell African stories today? And how can we ensure that communities are involved in sharing their own narratives?
Well, I think anyone or any business that has an authentic African experience has an ability to share their story. I don't think, it should be limited to, let's say, only Africans. So maybe if you're a company that operates in Africa, or you're a diaspora and you're not living in Africa. So I think that the most important thing is that you need to be authentic and it needs to be real. And I know from a Nando's perspective, we're often seen as the voice of the people. We always talk about things that are important to South Africans particularly, and that we speak sort of what they say, truth to power. And we poke a bit of fun at it, and we bring humor in, which of course is completely related to our brand, making it resonate again. In actual fact, it's become such a big thing that there are so many people out there who make fake Nando's ads because they expect Nando's to say something. So sometimes it gets us in a bit of trouble, but of course it wasn't us. But it's quite a powerful position to be in, that people are making ads on your behalf.
Then you have a brilliant brand.
Exactly. So there's some really cool examples. We talking about a voice of the people, where we did the diversity ad, which was a very hot topic about all the foreigners need to leave South Africa. And then there was this ad where everyone who wasn't South African authentically would blow up in smoke. So, it went through all the Afrikaans and then the English and then the Zulus and everyone. And in the end, the only person left was a Khoisan guy. And it just actually spoke to the fact that actually all of us are pretty much foreigners living in South Africa. So it resonated because it was true and people laughed and it was funny. Another one was actually my favorite ad of Nando's, was called The Last Dictator. I don't know if you guys have seen that. It's the one where it's all about, no one should eat alone, even if you're a dictator, basically. And it had Robert Mugabe and Gaddafi, and they were doing like snow angels in the sand. And it was, again, poking fun at these sort of dictators that were ruling Africa. And it was just such a fun way to speak about what people want to say but can't really say. So that was cool. We've collaborated with other brands, some of them more organically. So for example, I know there was an ad, Sanlam, the insurance company, brought Nando's into one of their ads. And then, tactically we responded by making the ad again, but with them as the inclusion. So it was quite fun. That was just obviously quite opportunistic. And then there's been examples where we've actually collaborated with some of our competitors. So in the time of crisis, where we actually should be coming together and not sort of poking fun at each other or whatever. So we had this campaign called Frenemies. So friends are enemies. And where KFC and McDonald's and Nando's all worked together to produce food that was, those 6 weeks of hard lockdown, there's obviously stock. We were either going to write that stock off or we were going to feed people. So we put this whole campaign together and we really worked together to feed people in need. So that's a really great example of bringing, in communities, or the voice of people who really don't have a voice necessarily, or working with competitors to bring a bit of fun about important topics that need to be spoken about.
Thank you. So talking of KFC, Sola, you sort of mentioned when a global brand enters the African market, what should they understand about the power and the pitfalls of storytelling? What's the first piece of advice that you want to give a foreign brand that launches a campaign in Africa?
Yeah, so thanks for that, Christine. I think I will speak from a Nigerian perspective. I don't know if this works for us. Drop something in the comments. So I think in Nigeria, first of all, Nigerians are very Nigerian. It's important for you to acculturize and lean into the Nigerian tastes. We're very, very into our taste. So for instance, British Airways, Nigerians complained so much about the food. Eventually, they had to bring in jollof rice into the menu. And so they always have jollof rice. And like Nigerians kept complaining. And they had to change their menu for the Lagos-London flights, which is what, and jollof rice is wonderful. We love it. And everybody started eating it. For the one was eating their food, yeah. And I was happy that they were responsive about it. KFC also had to bring jollof rice into their menu as well. They still have the fried chicken we love and everything. So you have to really lean into those tastes, and I think a lot of the brands that have been successful here have done that really well. So there are a lot of products in Nigeria that taste only the way they do in Nigeria. An example is Nestle's Milo. The Nigerian Milo is so unique that when I lived in Holland, I used to travel 2 hours to go, and apologies for anybody from Kenya, it's not the same. So it's tasted, and that's the thing. So all the Nigerians in diaspora are buying the Nigerian Milo. And there was something that happened with British Airways when they had this advert running for a very long time, where Comic Relief, I don't know if you've ever flown BA, they have this partnership with Comic Relief where they say they raise funds in flight and then they donate to children. So for a very long time, the message that they were pushing out was, we're sending this to children in Africa. And every time I was on a flight, Nigerians would complain, why are you saying children in Africa? Are there no poor children around the world? Eventually, they changed the messaging and they changed it to children around the world.
Wow.
So that's the Nigerian market. So you must all, and so you kind of culturalize others. So for instance, what Christy talked about, I mean, Nando's was able to weigh in on such a sensitive issue. Oh my goodness, you wouldn't be able to do that in Nigeria.
Sola, you're breaking up on my side. I'm not sure whether you can hear her. So I didn't get the last part.
Oh, sorry. Was I breaking up? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yes. Okay. Yeah, no. Perfect.
Okay, so I was saying that, yes, so you have to acculturize, and you need to be, you need to maintain situational awareness and realize that you'll be judged more harshly than others. So for instance, I was really amazed to hear that Nando's could weigh in on a very sensitive topic like that in South Africa. I don't think any international in Nigeria would do that. There would be a huge backlash. Stay out of our business. This doesn't concern you. Yeah. So yes, Rihanna, clearly, yeah, absolutely. So that's really amazing. So it's just that every market is different. So I think and I think most multinationals know this. When you get into every market, you really need to understand, how people are and the sensitivities, and then just, But it's really great to hear that example from Kirsten.
No, great. So Sabra, was there a moment when a seemingly small or very simple story ended up creating real change, being it in an attitude or policy or behavior that you want to share with us?
Yes, absolutely. So I also have the privilege of working with various activists, change makers around the continent through being a mentor with an advocacy agency out in Dakar, Senegal, Niel. And we work with fellows from all fields, sanitation, health, digital rights activists, environmentalists. And every year we have 3 boot camps, and we mentor them throughout this 9-month period on advocacy and communication. And storytelling is one of the things we spend a whole week boot camp in working with them. And the reason being is the first boot camp we have is to get them to identify their change objective. So what are they trying to change? And it's hard because they know the work that they're doing, but they haven't had the time to dig deep into why they're doing it. So once they identify why they're trying to create the change that they're working on, then a few months later we go into storytelling. And I have to say that a lot of these young, brilliant minds have powerful stories, and many of them don't know it. So through the boot camp and through the training, we try to get them to dig deeper, so that they can share the story, so they can recognize what is going to make a change in how they pitch their advocacy. It's also a process for them to identify their extraordinary stories, to get them to feel comfortable, because again, we have to reach out, and sometimes they have to be vulnerable to be able to share some of their stories. Some could be, joyful stories, some could be sad, some could be inspirational, but it's a process to get them to dig all of that out. And especially the silent heroes, they are the hardest storytellers to train. They're excellent at what they do, but they have a hard time sharing their successes and acknowledging that they're experts because they feel it's bragging, while they have every right to brag. So I've had the pleasure of working with one specific Nigerian digital rights activist among so many other fellows that I work with. And she really wanted to change and make a difference in digital rights law in Nigeria. Her main thing was a lot of digital professionals were being convicted, and that's because the judges didn't understand the digital rights law. So she, through the fellowship program and through the training and storytelling, she was able to develop a digital rights law manual that would help the judge understand digital rights law. She was able to pitch that to the national judiciary in Nigeria. She was able to get that implemented and delivered just very recently. And it was all possible because of the passion she's had of telling the stories of how she goes and does a lot of pro bono defense of these digital professionals. She spends half her day working from the police stations. And so the work and the effort that she takes to defend all these digital professionals has been profound. And she had moments of brain freeze. You'd nudge her and say, well, tell us something that you really like to do. And she will tell us things and she's like, yeah, but this is okay. And we're like, no, that's actually something very powerful. So training and working with individuals like this in telling their story creates change. So now with her manual, with the judges and lawyers being trained in Nigeria, and with the skills that she has, the change is going to come, and the judges will know how to be able, there'll be fair judgment when they work with the digital professionals when the cases come to them. So
Sabra, thank you so much. That is so powerful, and it's lovely. And I think it's something that every communicator is dreaming of, to have a client like that actually embraces what you are teaching them and then go and implement it, and we can see the results. Thank you. Kirsty, you have 1 minute to answer the following. Storytelling can be powerful, but it comes with responsibility. So how do we ensure that our stories are ethical and that it's respectful, especially with a brand like Nando's, with a sense of humor? How you get the story across without offending and without not being ethical?
I have to say we've succeeded and we've failed on that in our history. So actually it used to be a strategy to, when we were much smaller and we were a much younger company, we didn't have so much marketing power and funding behind us. The sort of strategy was, err on the edge of controversy, because that's what gets you that, you know, people
Exposure.
speaking about you and stuff going viral. Then became quite political, quirky, which was great. And it then became quite political. And I think, you know, that dictator ad that I spoke about was sort of the end of that era, because it did actually offend quite a few people. And we also had some Mandela ads, and, you know, it's politics becomes quite of a, you know, a divider. You either pro it or not. So over the last couple of years, we've had to actually be a lot less risky and understand that we're obviously a much more mature business now, and we don't really have the luxury of doing that anymore, because we have a social responsibility, because we have a powerful voice. So it makes it a lot harder to be creative, I suppose, because you have to consider, you know, are you going to offend someone? Is it actually a topic that perhaps is too sensitive? So it's much harder. I actually feel sorry for our agencies, because it gets harder and harder to come up with the next amazing Nando's ad, because, you know, a lot of the topics potentially are too risque and could offend someone, and that's not what Nando's wants to do. We don't actually want to offend one. We like to poke and have a bit of fun, and that's why I think a lot of the time that you see those fake ads, because people are expecting it from Nando's, but we don't actually do that anymore. We don't have, and I think of one of the ads nowadays, you think, wow, that's so inappropriate, you know. There was like this ad, we were launching a double-breasted burger, and there was this lady with these big boobs, you know, and it was really funny in the 90s, but it's not so funny now to do that. So I think the reality is we've had to grow up and realize that we have a social responsibility, because we're powerful, that we cannot, you know, sexualize or offend people in a really meaningful way. So I think that's important.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, each of you literally has 30 seconds to give us a summary or to give us final thoughts on this webinar and on this theme of storytelling. Sabra, let's start with you.
Thank you. So for me, I think the most important thing is relationships. They're really, really important. They help us understand the people. We can ask questions. I like to ask a lot of questions, especially when it comes to cultural differences, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, and finding something in common. So for me, those are the things I always look for, and building my relationships with the people that I either work with in terms of storytelling, or even how I approach storytelling myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Kirsty?
I would say the power of storytelling is it needs to be emotive. And if you think about how are you emotive, it's often if you're speaking to a human truth. A great example is, I don't know if you remember the Alan Gray adverts, where they didn't actually even have to use a single word. It was just imagery. And because it was such an emotive story and it spoke to a human truth, you didn't have to say anything. People got it. So that was very powerful. And of course, because I'm Nando's, try and make it humorous. People like to be entertained. They like to laugh. And it's something that they will then remember and possibly share because it was funny. So yeah, be emotive and humorous if possible.
Absolutely. It works for you. Sola.
Yes. So I think the most important thing I would say about storytelling is tell your own story, own your own narrative. If you don't do that, somebody else is going to do it for you. I mean, a typical example happened to us in Nigeria recently when the matriculation board, the National Board for University Education, did an exam and just published the results. And the results, the results showed that 75% of the students failed. And they just threw out the report like they would, the results. But then other people then brought out that narrative. So the narrative on social media is 75% of students failed this exam. What's going on with JAMB? They need to do better. Whereas by the time you dig into the figures and you compare with historical years, you can actually see that the problem started from the COVID years. So there's a story that should have been told when that report was being released. They didn't tell the story. So the days of just throwing out a report without putting a story around it, the context that people need to understand why this is so. So they're now on the back foot. And, you know, there's all that conversation, they've lost control of it. So own your narrative. Whatever it is that you're, like I said, you can't just throw out a report anymore. People will curate their story out of it if you are not proactive about doing so. Thank you.
Love it. Thank you. Natalie, can I please ask if you can put up the last slide for us? And this actually links very well with this webinar, is that the IABC Africa is launching a Voices of Impact in Africa campaign. And we would love everybody to please participate, to send us a 30 or 60-second video selfie in portrait, where you share your view on why you are proud to be a communication professional in Africa and how your work makes a difference. I mean, today we've heard numerous stories that would make amazing videos. So ladies, I hope that we will get something from all three of you. But please, if you are an IABC member and you're out there to get your actual video, please share your story. And if you picked up a few tips and tricks today during this webinar that you can implement, just imagine how fantastic is going to be. Our time is up, and I'm really sad because, I mean, there's so many questions that I still had that I wanted to ask you, but you were a fantastic panel. Your examples were brilliant, and thanks for sharing your experience. Thank you for being open and honest about what worked, about what did not work, because I think sometimes we so sort of know we only want to give the actual positives, but it's necessary to know when things did not work out so that we can learn and we can adapt in terms of what is happening. So for everybody out there, thank you. If you are not yet an IABC member, please put your name in the chat box with "I want to become a member, send me more info" or something along those lines, and Natalie will then contact you. Brianna and Natalie at the backside of things, thank you so much for your support and for the technical stuff and that it went well. As far as I know, this recording will be made available, and we will also make sure that it goes onto our IABC Africa YouTube channel for those who missed it. Thank you for everybody, loved it, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good
Bye-bye.
day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.